All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome. Hey, guys, Guy here. A lot going on today. For those of you into the news, Zay Jones got released by the Jags, so we'll have something more on that later in the podcast. Because as you all know, Zay Jones was supposed to be the centerpiece of a Brandon Ayuk trade. Somehow it didn't come together. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about two 49ers draft picks from Florida State, and our next guest is an expert on this subject from Knowles 247, Brendan Sonnone, who is getting ready for maybe one of the most eclectic college football schedules around the nation this year. Florida State's going to open its season in Dublin. They're going to come home and play a league game against Cal a few weeks later. They're going to go to Notre Dame. Florida State Cal, ACC football. It's almost here.
Makes perfect,
Brendan, what's up, man?
Sense, doesn't it?
It makes perfect sense. Yep. But thanks for making time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to be here. And when we started to set this up, there was one FSU player to talk about, and now lo and behold, there too. So
that's right. The seventh. Well, let's go in order. Let's talk about one and then the other. But Tatum Bethune, the 7th round pick, the linebacker, and then RENARDO GREEN, the cornerback, who went pick 64. Just let's start with him and the reaction to where he was drafted, both in location in the draft and destination.
Yeah. So RENARDO GREEN, he was polarizing as a prospect when you just kind of pay attention. I'm a huge draft nerd, like outside of just what I do with Florida State stuff. Like I follow it pretty closely. And so anyways, I say all that because I was paying attention to where he was going to go. And there were some outlets that had him like this is like 4th, 5th round, a definitive day 3 stuff. I think Mel Kiper of ESPN didn't love the RENARDO GREEN pick when it was made in the 2nd round, but like I thought RENARDO had a chance to go in the 2nd round. I actually do like an off-season fantasy league where I will like pick a team and draft players for that team. And RENARDO, I was the San Francisco 49ers, and guess who I took at the end of round 2?
You took RENARDO GREEN?
I did.
Brendan, you're a sicko, I think. You're one of those.
I am a nerd is the nicest way I can describe it. I think RENARDO has a really good shot to be a long-time NFL player, like someone who can start for 6 or 7 years in the NFL. He's going to come in as like a ready-made player, and there's some like malleability with his skill set. Like he was awesome as a press man corner for Florida State the last 2 years, especially this past season. But he played safety earlier in his career, and that's one of the reasons why he was kind of a late bloomer. They moved positions for him a couple of times with new schemes and coaching staffs. He had some injuries, but he's also someone like you probably put him at nickel too if you want like a big physical nickel, because he is so physical coming up to stop the run or perimeter game. So yeah, I thought this was the earlier part of where he could go, but 2nd round like made sense to me, and I thought San Francisco was a really good fit given that there was some needs at defensive back and that he can play again multiple spots. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me. So I love the pick. I thought it was great for him and for San Francisco.
Why is he polarizing? What is it that like Mel Kiper didn't like? What? Because he does seem like he's a polarizing prospect.
He is. So he's a little older. He was a class of 2019 recruit. I think that's part of it. But that's also like football right now, right? It's
it was a geriatric draft.
The COVID year has kind of made that. That's starting to kind of, and NIL too. But both of those things have made it to where you get guys staying longer than you had before. That's starting to phase itself out a little bit. So I think that's part of it. His testing was solid. Like I think the relative athlete score was like 70th percentile, 70th to like high 70s. So it was good. It just wasn't phenomenal. And you watch him play, like he's not this super like twitched up, physically imposing guy, but he's super under control, and he is extremely physical, both with the press coverage and his instincts are really good. And like when someone gets to step on him, it's just like the spatial recognition. It's hard to describe. He doesn't get burned a lot because, and again, he's not a burner. He runs like a 4.5 40. He just has a knack for understanding angles and where he is on the field and where the ball's going to go. And so, the people who wanted these, like you want like a super toolsy cornerback, that's not him. But very reliable, like eat your vegetables type of DB, like that's him. Like he's going to be solid. And it's hard to envision a world where he's just not like at the very least like okay. So I think it depends on what you're looking for and what your draft philosophy is. Is he going to be a Jalen Ramsey type of proverbial all-pro? Probably not. Is he going to have a better chance than most to play in the NFL for 7-8 years and start for most of that and be really solid? Like, yeah, no, I think that's what you're getting in him.
Well, as you know, like as you prepare for the draft, like the Niners have one true corner in Mooney Ward. They have Diamador Lenore who could play outside or play nickel. And like I think maybe they'd like to play him outside. Like they're just drafting a corner and trying to find the best three. So if you had to guess right now, is he a nickel first or is he a cornerback? Is he outside corner first?
Yeah, that's good because I think the skill set to play nickel exists just with that temperament that he has, and he's got good quick feet. So I'm not sure what San Francisco's like preference for like body type at slot is. Some like bigger slot corners, and others are going to be more quick, twitchy, more like what they were when you thought of a nickel corner, 15 years ago. Some still do that, but he has, I think, the versatility to do that. He was so good outside for Florida State last year, and just the press man mirroring ability is really high end, and he does it at such a high level. I think he led the country in pass, or at least the draft class, in like passes defended in man coverage. And part of that is Florida State does a lot of man coverage, but like I'm pulling up the PFF stuff right now for him. Like, yeah, he 51% completion percentage, 13 passes defended. He didn't give up 3 touchdowns. This is the one weakness in his game, I'll say, guy, that is super interesting to me. That's like the only thing that like really sticks out when you watch him as a negative. He struggles with like end zone fade patterns, and I don't get it. Like his ball recognition is so good. The physicality is so good. And for some reason, he's just struggled multiple times to get his head turned around. But if you work on that, like that's really the only like real like weakness there. So anyways, say all that. I think he's probably going to be most well suited to being outside cornerback in the NFL.
I think when he got drafted, a lot of people went straight to the schedule and then went straight to YouTube to go, all right, he played Malik Neighbors and he played Ricky Pearsall. So from what I watched, the Malik Neighbors game looked like he played very well. I think Neighbors had his second lowest yardage total. His lowest yardage total actually until the last game of the year. I think they held Neighbors to like 62 receiving yards. But how did he play against LSU and how did he play against Ricky Pearsall in Florida?
Yeah, he shut Malik Neighbors down, and that was a clinic. And at the time you knew that Gabe Neighbors is a former Florida State player. That Malik Neighbors was a high-end player, and you knew that Jaden Daniels was a high-end player. And they ended up both having like prolific years. Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman Trophy, Malik Neighbors 6th overall pick. So it was a really good performance in that moment and really impressive, and it just got better. It aged well over time of how well he shut down Malik Neighbors. I think he gave up 28 yards total in that game. And then against Florida, he's targeted twice, gives up 2 completions for a total of 15 yards. And I think what's like fits in well to like Renardo's personality, and you guys will get to know him as like he's very serious, very, very intense. You watch his like draft reaction, like there wasn't a ton of like joy, and that's just not how Renardo's. It's not the cut of his cloth. He is super. That helps him out, though, I think, when he's in these big moments in big games. That's when he played his best for Florida State against Louisville in the ACC championship game. And Jamari Thrash, like when they had to have it, he gives up 2 completions total on 6 targets, only 21 yards allowed. And like you don't see a lot of yak on him either. Like he gets up for big games. He has this killer instinct in those moments. Like I would implore like San Fran fans to watch him in a full game against Florida in that environment. It's on the road. Jordan Travis had just gotten hurt the game before, out for the season. Prime time. Florida's playing for a bowl game. Like it was not a great Florida team or great Florida offense, but like the stakes were really high, the atmosphere. And you watch Renardo Green get under the skin of the Florida players. He was instigating stuff all night while not making himself like get picked up a penalty or anything like that. He was.
Sounds like a Niner.
Yeah, he is. He's going to be someone who like he feels like kind of like the initial like John Lynch like draft classes. Who's a linebacker from Alabama that was just an absolute dog before he got hurt? I'm trying to think of
Reuben Foster.
Reuben Foster, like that kind of like just physicality.
That's a bad comp, Brendan. Bad comp.
Fair enough. But more of the playing style. There's this level of physicality to Renardo Green that I think it fits in really well with what you're going to want to do there. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for him.
I had to laugh. I watched his interview he did with the 49ers.com, and they were asking him about like his skills. And he's like, well, I've been playing football 20 years.
He's so straightforward. There's nothing
you never hear a 24-year-old be like, I've been playing football 20 years. Like, but that is Florida, right? Like you play football starting at tackle football at 5 years old, which is what he did.
And he's probably saying that just like very matter of factly.
Totally, 100%. He's like, I got 20 years under my belt.
Yeah, he is. I remember interviewing him as a recruit when he had committed to Florida State, and it was just asking about his game and stuff like that. And he described himself as like Wolverine, the X-Man, of just like I was just like this gritty loner type of guy, and like Wolverine made sense. It just kind of fit his personality. So
what's I was looking up. Is it Apopka, Florida?
Yeah, Apopka
outside of Orlando. That's
Central
Warren Sapp.
Florida. Really good football in Apopka. It's kind of as like it's this. It's not a small city. It's not a big one either. But it kind of has a small town vibe, and like football is a big deal there. And it is people gather around to watch Apopka football. And he went to Wekiva, which is their rival that got better over time, and he was a big part of like that Wekiva team ascent. I think Tyler Davis, who played defensive tackle for Clemson, was a 6th-round pick, was part of that team. So they had some like really, really good defenses at Wekiva when Renardo was there. I mean, he was a big part of that.
Yeah. I want to get to Tatum Bethune. Anything else on Renardo I didn't ask you about that you think?
No, I think that's everything on him. He's going to be a fun guy to watch. I will say like one other thing about Renardo Green, like that I appreciated is like there was a time in his career where I mentioned the injuries, right? And I mentioned position changes because he committed to Florida State's prior staff, the Willie Taggart era. He was a safety. Comes to Florida, or the new staff comes to Florida State, and they move him to cornerback, move him back to safety. He's got injury issues, and thought like going into the 2022 season that there was a shot that like he might get kind of pushed out of the lineup. And he ended up having a full healthy offseason finally, kind of turned the corner that spring, gets put into the starting lineup and just like never looked back. He's been awesome the last 2 years as a corner for FSU. So a self-made guy who just kind of has had like perseverance and had to kind of push through it. I think again, that's another part of his appeal is he had to kind of go through it and came out the other side. And I tend to like that in a prospect.
All right. So that's Renardo Green. Let's talk about Tatum Bethune, who you mentioned like a Niners comp. It's funny. And maybe sometimes you could reverse engineer like the reason this guy got drafted is maybe because he said some of what he said, but his draft video with the Niners, he said the guy he spent a lot of time watching this year was Dre Greenlaw. And I know I got messages from Niner fans after he got drafted. And 7th-round pick 251, linebacker, 5'11", 227. And immediately people started DMing me and texting me like, oh, this guy plays like Greenlaw, which is, that like if you're gonna be a 7th-round linebacker, you almost have to play like Dre Greenlaw. But anyway, give us your Tatum Bethune reaction.
I was so happy for Tatum Bethune because he is a consummate pro. So he came to Florida State from UCF 2 off seasons ago, and they really needed a linebacker to go next to Kalen DeLoach, who was more of a speedy, rangy guy. He's an undrafted free agent, went to Tampa Bay Bucks, and they needed like a steady presence there for Kalen to kind of continue to ascend. And Tatum had been a really productive linebacker at UCF. He was with now FSU linebackers coach Randy Shannon was the DC there and had recruited Tatum and developed him. And so he follows basically Randy Shannon to Florida State. And immediately, like talking to different people in the program was just gushing about how professional he was. And it was every single day, it was kind of handled it the same way, kind of soft-spoken, reserved, but very confident in what he does. And I remember Mike Norvell talking about the thing of Tatum Bethune was he was physically like unimposing. Like he didn't look like he was, 6 foot and 220, 230 pounds. But then you see him move and you see how physical he is when there's contact and had a penchant for like when he hit someone, like they stopped moving, which is kind of what you want at linebacker. And so he was kind of this unassuming guy, just his personality, the way he looked. And then you got into the 2022 season and they opened the year against LSU in New Orleans. And you watch him move in that game against an offense that ended up being really good. And you're like, yep, that's what it's supposed to look like. And he ended up dealing with injuries in 2022.
Were they the result of how he plays?
It was a shoulder injury against Louisville and just kind of stuck with him the rest of the year. And it did impact, like I remember like just like the physicality that he brought early on in that season, just like he struggled hitting people and stopping them. And that was such a difficult thing for him to overcome. And he kind of had some injuries like earlier this year too. And it ends up overcoming it and ending the year on a really high note. But so like the quintessential Tatum Bethune story is against Louisville in the ACC championship game. And again, Jordan Travis gets hurt. And then in the Florida game, the backup quarterback, Tate Rodemaker, gets a dirty hit as he's trying to slide. He's concussed. He's out. So FSU has to put in its freshman quarterback, Brock Glenn. Brock Glenn had missed half the year with a thumb injury. So, like, not only is he a true freshman, he's a true freshman that didn't get to practice for half the season. Yeah. And you're going against a really good Louisville defense was really good. And so, like, the defense knew that it was going to have to carry Florida State for it to have a shot at making the playoffs. And probably should have made the playoffs, but that's not here nor there. The defense willed that team to a win. And I don't think I've covered anything like that in 10 years. And at the heart of it, and there's great performances by Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and you can like listen to the Rams brass talk about that's why those guys got drafted and back-to-back rounds by then. Mm-hmm. Tatum Bethune has a drive, and it's late. It's in the second half. He had gotten hurt earlier in the game with a lower leg injury, and Adam Fuller, the defensive coordinator, went over to Tatum and basically told him, man, like, hey, this is it. Like we can sit you, but like this is it. This is our season. Tatum's like, okay, I'm good. He pushes through it. Late in that game, FSU has a blocked punt, and so the defense gets backed up in the red zone. The very first play, they target Tatum Bethune. He fights all the way through the pass in the end zone and knocks it out at the very end and picks up the football and goes running across, back the other side of the field, celebrating as if he was like manifesting that he had an interception. It clearly wasn't. Mike Norvell points get back to the huddle. But it was, keep that in mind. So that was the first play. It's like he manifested this thing. Second play, he gets a sideline tackle, strings it out to the sideline, shows off some good speed, gets it there. Okay, third down, they target Tatum Bethune one more time. It's like this kind of crossing pattern over the middle of the field. He leaps the route, he picks it off, and FSU gets out of that without giving up a point. And he willed it. And it was one of the coolest moments I've ever seen because it was just this guy leaving it all on the field, gutting it out, grittiness, and makes it happen. He ends up having a 92.6 PFF grade that game, his highest of the season, an elite grade. And just he wasn't even feeling all that great, and he made it happen. So that's my Tatum Bethune story. I think that summarizes who the 49ers are getting with a work ethic standpoint.
So it sounds like you recommend if someone wants to go watch a game where he stands out, go watch the Louisville game with the context of understanding these guys were fighting for something that nothing was guaranteed, as it turned out, right? But they knew if they had a shot, they had to win this game.
Watch him against Louisville to get that. And honestly, the Rams GM said the same thing about the defensive lineman they drafted too. This is just that entire defense.
Yeah.
Renardo Green as well in that game. That entire game was inspirational. Players finding another level that maybe they didn't know they had. It was really cool. It was unfortunate that it didn't lead to something bigger for that team. I think they deserved it. But yeah, I would say that game, and then also go ahead and if Stanford fans want to watch Tatum Bethune in 2021, it's at UCF against Florida as a bowl game. Kid from Miami, Florida, who was a 2000th ranked prospect nationally. I think UCF was his only offer, or one of his only group of 5 offers at the time. Fast forward a few years to see what that game meant to a kid in Florida who wanted to prove one of the big power teams wrong. That's another game I would suggest you watch as well.
I love the Florida guys. Out here you don't get as many of them. I know Utah started recruiting Florida guys several years ago, and so you get to talk to a few of them. Really good players, and they're just. I don't know. There's just something about high school kids from Florida playing football that I think what Green said is kind of what I always imagine with these guys, right? I've been playing football 20 years. To me, that summarizes kind of how I think about high school kids from the state of Florida.
And that's Tatum Bethune too. He's been around it his entire life. His dad is, I think it's a principal down there too. And so again, Tatum has this very reserved, mild-mannered, buttoned-up personality, but then there's that switch that gets flipped when he goes on the football field. He played at Miami Central, which is a program. They send out a lot of NFL players and have for a while. And you have to be really good to play that level of football in inner city Miami. And he did it at a really high level and it's been successful. Went to group of 5, really good there. Went up to Power 5, really good at Florida State. Just doesn't have all the physical tools in the world, doesn't have ideal measurables, but finds a way to get it done. And I'm a big proponent guy. If you're taking a guy in the 7th round, they either need to have something some freaky attribute, something really unique, or be really good at everything across the board, maybe not spectacular. And I think Tatum is the latter with that, where like solid in coverage, good instincts against the run, good tackler, doesn't have ideal size, but even that's not bad. He's not below average. Like his RAS score was like fine on and everything. So like I think Tatum's got a shot to make a roster because of how he's going to handle himself and just not be deficient in any one area.
Matters have done a good job in the 7th round, obviously. I mean, Purdy, but also Juwan Jennings a couple years ago out of Tennessee, who's turned out to be just an absolute home run pick. So we got a Seminole apparently in the chat as well. Somebody who listens to your podcast. So that's all right. By the way, last thing before I let you go, Florida State going to be any good this year?
I think so. I think they'll be good. 13-0, pushing for a playoff spot or invitational spot is what we're calling it in my household from now on. Yeah, I don't think that's the expectation, but it's funny. We were just talking about on our podcast I was recording right before of like what, FSU had 10 players drafted this past year. And there was a stretch back in between 2013 and 2015 draft cycles, so the 2020 or 2012 and 2014 seasons, where they had a record of like 20 something guys drafted, and 2 of those draft classes had 11 players taken. I don't think you're quite there yet, but the fact that I'm now looking ahead and being like, okay, I think there's 4 or 5 guys guaranteed in next year's draft class to go a year after losing 10 players. Like I think the program is starting to get stabilized. I think they're probably their next real like postseason push will probably be in 2025, just the amount of they're investing in their youth now and amount of like multi-year transfers they've gotten and a higher end of athlete. They'll be good. 10 wins should be like, I think 9.5 wins is the Vegas over. That seems about right. But I don't think I'm viewing them as a team that if things break right, they're a title contender this year. But hey, I've been wrong before.
All I know is the Cal game's coming up in like 4 or 5 months. I'm just ready.
Classic ACC football, man.
Yeah.
Classic
well, the
ACC.
real question is, will Brendan Sonnone ever make it to Cal Memorial Stadium?
No, I don't think
ACC
so.
game.
Yeah, we've thought about that. I don't think so. You know what? FSU's also at SMU, another classic ACC game this year.
Yep.
Book. If you're a Florida State fan, you've always wanted to go to Dallas for some reason. Probably book it now would be the wise move.
This is the one to hit.
This is the one to get it. Absolutely.
Brendan, this was fun, man. Thanks for making time. Great perspective and just fun talking to you.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
All right. There is Brendan Sonnone, Knowles247. I'm going to pull him out. For those of you watching this live, in the description, there's a link to another video we're about to do with Clay Hendricks, who's the Furman football coach. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him because he's got some cool stuff in his background, in addition to being the guy that helped turn Mason Pline from a basketball player to a tight end to an undrafted free agent signing for the 49ers. So if you're watching this live, in the description right now, click that link. We're going to be over there in just a second with Furman's head coach, Clay Hendricks. All right. Thanks, y'all.